on now. Thank you, everyone, and welcome to our fourth webinar. My name is Peter Monkhouse, and I'll be hosting this webinar on Execute with Jira Tips and Tricks. So we're pleased to have a couple of guests with us today to talk about Jira and some of the tricks and tips with what we're going to do. So as I mentioned, I'm Peter Monkhouse. So along with Joanna Tivic, who you'll hear from shortly, we've written the book Gen P, the best-selling book Gen P, Product Owners Who Care About Customers, as well as developed an online course for product owners and creating an ecosphere of tools and techniques, webinars, and other resources to help product owners do their job a little bit better, and an opportunity to share some of our experience and experiences from others with us. So as I mentioned, we are going to be doing a demo of using Jira and Confluence. This will be a live demo. So as you know, with anything that's live, there may be some hiccups, so apologize in advance if there is any for that. The demo will be done from the perspective of a product owner, and Omar and Joanna will talk a little bit more about that as we go through. And we're starting off with Jira and Confluence, as they're two of the more popular tools that product owners will use and Agile teams will use. So with that, let me turn over to Joanna to say a few more words.
Thank you so much, Peter. Peter and I dedicate our time to do these webinars. This is our fourth. And I thank you so much for being here, because this is important for product owners. So when we wanted to do this webinar, we definitely thought about how to set up Jira and Confluence and how to get an environment to do that. So Paul volunteered to help us with Valiantys. So I let Paul introduce himself and say a couple of words about Valiantys.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Joanna and Peter. Great intro. So you might not have heard of Valiantys. Valiantys is a solution partner for Atlassian. We do nothing but work on Atlassian solutions. And we make no apology for that, because we feel that Atlassian is the best software in the world that helps teams become as productive as they possibly can at the team level, across teams, across the enterprise, helping a number of constituents, especially product owners, because they really rely on team and issue tracking and workflows, and you'll see some of that with Omar. And so we're global. We're about 200 employees around the world. We generate we're pushing $100 million in Canadian in revenue, 17 offices. We're based in Toronto, Montreal, in Canada. And we help all kinds of customers, small, mom and pop shops, all the way to large banks, financial institutions in Canada. Next slide, Peter. So as I was saying, so we're technology services consulting. So we will help develop Atlassian solutions. We will optimize solutions. We provide training around Atlassian. We will outsource the administration of the Atlassian tool. We also will host it as you might require it, and we will help you move to cloud. Cloud's very fashionable today. It's where the whole world's moving, and there's a lot of legacy Atlassian people, customers with server implementations that are looking to move to the cloud. We help with that. And then on the top row, so the reason that people adopt Atlassian is because they want to do Agile, as I mentioned earlier, or IT service management, the ITIL practice. And we have a special flavor, what we call lean, not your traditional heavyweight ITSM. And then finally, workflows and issue tracking applies everywhere, especially for product ownership, but it applies anywhere, HR, legal, wherever there is a workflow or a issue that needs to be tracked and an approval process, it says. So think of this, my name is Paul Mifsud, and I'll turn it over to back to the Gen P team. Thank you very much. You're on mute, Peter.
Yes, thank you, Paul. Really appreciate you helping us out. Yes, remembering to run all these controls. It's tough for all of us. So now it's great pleasure. I'd like to introduce Omar Contreras. So Omar is a PMP, project manager professional, and a Six Sigma Green Belt. with over 15 years of experience working on large-scale and complex projects and process improvement initiatives. He's passionate about enabling Agile delivery and transformation using Agile methodologies and product management tools. So what we'd like to do first is let Omar talk about what we're going to do with this demo. So Omar, over to you.
Thank you, Peter, for that great introduction. Feel humble about it. Thank you so much. So what I'm going to describe here is this is what is called a context diagram, right? In this case, I'm gonna use it to describe how Jira works with Confluence and plugins. So I would like to use an analogy, a very simple analogy. Think about Jira as your car, right? So Jira is your car, your engine. Confluence would be the bodywork of your car. Zephyr will be your brakes, right? Easy Agile will be the steering wheel, and Gliffy will be the dashboard of your car. So with integrations between Jira and Confluence, you can create a product setting in a nice Confluence space. You can use macros as the product calendar that is also integrated with Jira, and that way you will see in the calendar your iterations or releases. When you use Easy Agile plugin, that will allow you to obviously get integrations with Jira, to manage or to have information such as the personas, the definition of done, the definition of ready, the acceptance criteria. But Easy Agile will help you with your story map and manage your product backlog. That's why the analogy that I used is the steering wheel. And then Gliffy will help you create in Confluence nice wiki pages with a macro that is close to Visio. If you remember MS Office, Visio helps you to create process flows and other types of diagrams. So Gliffy will help you with that in Confluence. So in Gliffy, we have created a product roadmap and a user journey to demonstrate how powerful this plugin is and how to use it. Joanna will now present the idea about how this demo was generated, and we will start immediately.
Okay, perfect. So you can see the variety of features that all these applications have, and it's very important that when we wanted to show all this, to have an idea and have a project beneath so we can show you that. So basically took an example from our book, and this is a travel website. So in chapter 5 of our book, you can find it there. And these are all the features in the backlog and the iterations that we scheduled there. So this is what we're going to show today, how this was set up. This is an interactive demo. So I will start with some questions for Omar. And then I will expect you to ask questions as we go, because we want to make this very interactive. And then we will prioritize your questions as they come. So with that in mind, Omar, so I'll let Omar show his screen. So we can go through the demo.
Yes, thank you, Joanna. So I'm sharing my screen. Please
Perfect.
let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can. Perfect.
Okay,
This
perfect.
is great. And the first question that I have for you is that based on the features that we showed and that we had in our chapter, can you show us like how you set up Jira first, and where did you put those features first?
Yeah, okay. So let's quickly show Jira first. The first thing that I did, based on your travel application example that you just showed, so I used Easy Agile, the Easy Agile plugin that you can see here, to create the story map. So that allows you to create the epics at the top and then start creating stories at the end of the plugin, right? And they are included in the backlog. So I'm gonna quickly show how you can create a new story, very simple. So in this case, I'm gonna create it under the display trip epic, or if I want to, for example, let's say that you have finished an iteration, but there was missing a story for login, logout. So you can also create that under this epic. For the sake of the demo, I'm just gonna create one here, new story. You select, in this case, the issue type, story, and you click create. That way, the new story is immediately created under the epic. The plugin allows you to add components and the description, which will include the story details, the persona, the need, and the benefit, the release, and the story details, right? So to answer your question, Joanna, I used Easy Agile to create the structure and the product and the user story map.
Can you show us how you can prioritize your epics at the top? So you can actually, can you drag and drop? Like if I want, for example, update trip to be in the first iteration, can I do that?
Yes, so that is a very good question. So at the top of the story map, we usually want to have our epics, right? Now, when we talk about prioritization of the epics, we also need to talk about sequence, right? So they go hand in hand, right? Because let's assume we say display trip is priority number 1. However, when we think about the product, you cannot display the trip if you don't log in, right? So that association will tell you, all right, so then I guess priority number 1 and sequence number 1 is the login, right? Now, Easy Agile allows you to move the epics, right? So for example, let's assume it's priority number 1 right now, and right now it's priority number 2. So drag and drop. It's very simple, very easy. So you can play with the stories, with the epics. You can move them to the iterations without starting the iteration, so that you have an accurate story map.
Perfect, thank you. So now if I wanted to represent a product roadmap, so let's say that this is for the travel website, but these are only the features that I gave you. But overall, on the travel website product, I want to represent the product roadmap, where I can see everything. I can see what I'm gonna do maybe in 6 months or 1 year from now.
Yep. So as I mentioned before, Confluence is the bodywork of my car, right? So to represent the product roadmap, I will use Confluence. And in this case, I will use the dashboard feature, which will be Gliffy, right? So in Confluence, I created the bodywork of my car, or the Confluence space for the product. As you can see here, I created 2 sections, one for delivery and one for communication and reporting. And within delivery, I created a section that is called product. Within the product, I created a page that is called the product roadmap. Just quickly log in. And this is the magic that you basically can create by using this plugin, right? So it allows you to create diagrams such as these here. This is the product roadmap. As you can see, you can create a timeline at the top in months. Then I created another timeline per weeks. We have 2 releases as the travel application example that you provided. And then I included the epics as swim lines, vertical swim lines. Now, the beauty of this is that you can integrate this with other Confluence pages. So what I did to demonstrate the power of this plugin is I created a sub page in Confluence as well that is pulling the information from Jira. So this is basically the stories that we have in release 1. One by one, you can see the personas as components, the epic links, and the description. And down below, I'm using a predefined blueprint from Confluence, right? That provides you with some pie charts about this particular release. What you can see here is that right now, the stories that we have in release 1, we have 6 high priority, 3 are the highest, 1 low priority, and 6 medium. This one is telling you what we have completed and what we have still to do. This is for the purpose of the demo. I have some stories already in progress and some already completed so that you can see data here.
Perfect. So we have a question from Nawaz, and his question is it possible to visualize dependencies between epics and stories? And I think you showed something in Confluence. Is there any other way? Like here you can see that you have the epics and then you have the stories, but can we see it in a
yes,
different
so the way it works, I'm gonna quickly click on edit, because basically what you need to do is, this is called the Jira Macro that is pulling the information. So what you need to do is, in the display options, you need to include the linked issues field, insert, and update the page. Now, in this case, scroll to the bottom, because I need to scroll to the... In this case, I don't have any linked... Oh, yeah, I do have. So as you can see now, this story 36 has 2 linked issues. So if you click on it, this is a risk. And the second one is a test case. So this is the way to link everything. For example, if you were to raise a bug within this test case, you will also see it here. Right? So that is the easiest way to link other issue types in Jira to a story. And that includes risks, decisions, bugs, test cases, etc.
But from an epic and user story perspective, is there something where you can see this is my epic, which is log in, log out, and these are all the user stories under that epic?
Yes, so this is a good example, right? So this, the way this page is set up is to bring everything under a release, but with a filter instead of, when you use this macro, you have a filter query here. As you can see here, I'm bringing everything under a particular release, but you can build a query saying, bring me something under epic login, logout. I'm not gonna do it right now because I'm gonna break the page. But when you do that, when you build a query, what you will see in the screen, I'm just gonna close it. What you will see here at the top of the screen is, instead of seeing everything from a release perspective, you will see everything under login, logout, right? But in a similar view. You will see all the stories. You can also tell the query, show me stories, show me test cases, show me bugs, show me everything under this epic.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. So now let's go and set up a user story. So let's build the user story from scratch, because I see some questions about acceptance criteria. So we can go through a user story and we can see how we set up the personas, the acceptance criteria, the definition of done, definition of ready. So everything in there in the user story.
Yes, perfect. Okay, so one best practice in Jira is to use components to set your personas, right, for your particular product. So as you can see here, you can create as many components as you want. You name it, right? And then you add here a description. You can even assign a lead What that will do is that every single time you create a story or any other issue type with airline component, for example, if I am the lead, I'm going to get a notification from Jira saying this new bug or this new story or this new task was created under this component. That way you can keep track of everything for a particular persona if you are the lead, right? So you can use that functionality or not. So components, best practice, set them up in Jira using components. Now, acceptance criteria, definition of done and definition of ready. The best practice is Jira, when you start creating your setup in Jira, you're gonna see that there is no field for the definition of done, acceptance criteria, or definition of ready. Your system admin have to create them. Now, I'm going to go directly into an already created story. I'm gonna click on edit to demonstrate how it will look. So these are three custom fields that I created in advance for the definition of done, the definition of ready, and the acceptance criteria. The first two are checkboxes. So when you are a Jira admin, you have the ability and the permissions to create custom fields. So you would select checkbox, and then you will add the options, right? So in this case, for the sake of this demo, these are actually industry-wide definition of done and definition of ready criteria, right? That most of us have already used or have heard about them. So the definition of ready is basically the criteria to ensure that the story is ready to go into an iteration. And the definition of done are all the criteria that a story must meet in order for the product owner to accept it. The acceptance criteria is the functional criteria that you will type in this box to ensure that, that whatever the developers and the testers do meet the requirements of the story. So you will type them in here. So that is basically the best practice in terms of creating the structure for the story and then updating the story.
Okay. And then can you show also the priority where you set the priority for the story?
Yes, so the priority is an out-of-the-box Jira field. This one comes with the Jira instance. In this case, it comes with 4 values: highest, high, low, and lowest. So each story that is created, you can change the priority here, and then when you are in your backlog mode, you can see it here in the story, so that you can, for example, start dragging them. The product owner will say, all right, I need all the high stories at the top. For example, this one, let's move it up. Let's ensure we have the highest priority stories at the top. And then when we go into a sprint planning session, we have all the highest priority stories at the top for grooming, and after the meeting to be selected and included in the iteration.
Perfect. The reason why I wanted the product owner to set the priority at the beginning was that they usually put high or the highest to everything. So I wanted to show them that, you know, everything is high. So they have to then go through that and reprioritize and make sure that they have, you know, only up to 10 in the highest priority, and then they will have to lower the priority as they go. So it's great to see that view.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Joanna. Depending on how your Jira setup is done, in my case, for this particular project, all the stories that I created were set with medium priority, right? But it could be high or low depending on how your Jira setup is done. But yeah, that is a very good point. You always need to come back to the story, review the priority, and set it according to the product owner requirements.
Perfect. So Sandeep has a question. How do you estimate story points or hours? Where do you specify them?
Yes, thank you, Sandeep. So the story issue type in Jira has a field for story points. Yep, here. Usually, personally, and from a best industry practice, I use story points to estimate stories and use the Fibonacci scale, the 1, 3, 5, 8, 13, and 21 points. When we personally, and in my experience, when you have a story that the whole team say it's a 21 point, I would break that story into 2 or 3 stories separately because the effort is too high. But this is where you will capture the story points. Now, this field in Jira works with the reports. For example, I already worked for the purpose of this demo on an iteration, right? You can see here my sprint report, and basically I finished the development and the testing and accepted all the stories today in the morning. You can see that, yeah, somehow I started working suddenly because I was on vacation, almost finished all the work. Then I finished the last 5 user story points here, and now we are back to 0. So those are the, when you set the story points in the story, you are also enabling the reporting out of the box Jira functionality. So very good practice to use that field instead of hours.
Okay, perfect. So there is another question. Is the Confluence data synchronized with Jira, or you need an extra step?
When we, let me ask a question. When we are saying synchronization between Jira, do we mean pulling information from Jira? I guess the answer is yes, right?
Yes. Yes.
Oh.
So I think that's the, you know, the transfer of data from the two.
Yeah. So let me just move this thing up. Move. And I'm going to go back here. So I'm going to go back to my travel website. So yes, so let me show you this page again. So for example, this is a product requirements login. So the way to pull information from Jira is to use the Jira Macro, right? So you can type in any page in Confluence, Jira. And as you can see, you can even create a new issue directly in a Confluence page. You can select the project. You say issue type, I'm going to create a new story. And this is a new story from Confluence page, right? And if you save it, so now you have a new story here at the top, and if you click on it, it will take you directly to Jira. So the best way to create your integration is with the use of the Jira Macro. Jira Macro is an out-of-the-box Jira function. Is an out-of-the-box Confluence macro.
Yep. Okay, so I think there was another question, but Sandeep answered it in terms of how you set up tasks under user stories. So it's basically, I think you showed it, you know, it's a drop down, and then you can put it underneath to say this is a task. So it's a matter of structuring your backlog.
Yes, but that's actually a very good question, because in my experience, I have seen a lot of confusion between the task and the subtask issue types in Jira. So the structure in Jira is you have your epics at the top. The second level is the story or the task. And the third level is the subtask. So when you have a story and you want to break down that story into components or work, you're going to use a subtask. not a task. Otherwise, the task will be outside of the story, and then you are going to have to link it. So you need to think about this, about what you're doing. Do you want to create a task that is outside of the story and then link it, or you want to create a subtask within the story? If it is a subtask within the story, you need to access the story, click on more, scroll down, and you see here, create subtask. Let's just create it for the sake of the demo. Subtask 2. I'm gonna add a component and create. So when you do that, you're gonna see your subtask within the story right after issue links.
Perfect. Okay, so we have we have a lot of questions, so thank you so much. This is great, and I promise I will go through all questions, so just bear with me. So we have a question from Sandeep. Did a quick check on Atlassian Marketplace. I see 6 easy Agile apps. Do you recommend getting all 6 or only the one for story mapping?
Well, you need to think about, I guess, efficiency. That would be my answer, right? I like to go into the community, investigate about what is the best plugin available. The one that we are showing right now is Agile, has very good reviews, is very simple, but try to go with one, right? Because think about it, if you get 2, let's assume you buy 2, they are gonna show up here, right? You're gonna have user story map here, and then another user story map 2 option here. Your team is gonna be confused because this is basically the setup of Jira. You're gonna have 2 plugins that basically do the same. So think about that, analyze the benefits, the pros and cons between the 2 plugins, and pick the best for your needs.
Perfect. And then which app are you using for the Gantt chart?
The Gantt chart, I'm gonna ask Paul, can you remind me the name? I think it's Gantt chart for Jira. I think that's the one that we are using here.
It's Gantt chart for Jira. You're correct, Omar.
Yep, that's the one. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, perfect. So Indira has a question. Can you please talk about using Jira versus Confluence versus Trello, mainly advantages and disadvantages?
Very good question. I'm going to start answering your question by saying that I have not used this Trello before, so I cannot speak to that, but I can definitely talk about Jira and Confluence. And if you remember my analogy, Jira and Confluence work together, but they have different purposes. Jira is your engine, is your product management tool. And Confluence is the bodywork of your car. In other words, I always like to say that Confluence is the aggregation reporting tool, right? So you manage your product in Jira. This is where you have your story map, you have your boards, you have workflow. This is where you move stories from to do to done. This is where you have your testing management solution. You do testing here, you raise bugs, you solve bugs, you capture everything here. But Confluence is where you can create, let me go back to Confluence quickly. Confluence is your bodywork, right? Is where you pull the information. It's like your SharePoint site, if you will. I don't like that analogy, but think about that. This is where you have everything consolidated for reporting purposes, tracking mechanisms. If you see this is a macro in Confluence that is called Team Calendar, but it's also pulling information from your engine, in this case, Jira. It's telling you that you have an iteration that started in June the 1st and is being completed today, and you are going to have your release into production today. So this is a very good way to show you right? So Confluence is your body work, your aggregation report tool, but Jira is your engine.
Yes, and if I may add to that, like I use Jira and Confluence for projects that are delivered with Scrum. So, and there are projects where you need more information, you need to create these reports, you need to create different views, you need to have all that combination of the features that Omar is talking about, whereas Trello is a simple tool. So if you have, work in Kanban, for example, Trello is good to have, because basically with Trello, you can just get things done and you can show them in Trello how the flow is going. So it's that thinking, if I have something more complex, I would go to Jira and Confluence. If I have something more simple, I would go to Trello.
Yeah. Now, let me add something to that, Joanna. Jira has Kanban boards too.
Yes.
As I am showing you here, this board that I created for risk management, this is a Kanban board. It's not a Scrum board. Why? Because in this case, or in this example, your risks or risk management when you are managing a product is a demand flow kind of type, right? So it's based on demand, right? So you work on risks as they arise, right? They are not bound to an iteration. So you can create also Kanban boards in Jira and Scrum boards for your stories, right? So if you see here, for my stories, I have a Scrum board, and for risks, I have a Kanban.
Yes, and you can have everything there organized that way.
I have everything in the same tool.
Okay, we have another question from Sandeep. Going back to the priority, so where we said high, highest versus ordering the PBIs, do you see them different? How do you approach? What's your approach for the two?
I don't think I understood the question.
So priority versus, yeah.
Sorry, maybe I'll just clarify. So, so Omar, most of the times what happens is you have, let's say, a product backlog. In this product backlog, the product owner has ordered certain items, the product backlog items, and it may happen that you have the topmost items already prioritized or specified as highest or high, the specific field which you have in Jira, and you have something as medium, which is still ordered higher than a product backlog item which has a priority of, let's say, high or highest. Now, from a development team's perspective, they would say that, hey, you know what? As per the Scrum and Jira, as per the Agile principles, we'll take up those items which are ordered on the highest, which are ordered on the topmost part of the product backlog. So at times there could be a confusion between, hey, certain things are ordered on the top side. There are a few things which have a higher priority, but they are ordered at a lower side. So what would you suggest?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Sandeep, for the clarification. So, couple of things. My advice is keep things simple, right? Because I mean, yeah, you can go into a discussion about the priority categories that you want for your product, and then you can get a list of 10, right? So keep it simple. If you can manage your product with high, medium, low, it's going to be better for you. Now, if you really need to add another priority level above the highest, for example, stopper and critical, in my current employment, I have those two. I have above high, I have critical, and above that, I have, I think, blocker. You can set them up. You can customize the out-of-the-box priority field. Well, in this case, it has to be your Jira admin, and then you can customize the setup for that purpose. But I would always recommend to keep things simple, right? Do not overcomplicate things. At the end of the day, if you have high, medium, low, or you have 10 types of priorities, you're going to be working on them in the order of the priorities, right? So that would be my suggestion, recommendation.
Sure, thank you.
Perfect. So we have a question about portfolio for Jira. This is not something that we set up, but if there is interest, we are definitely willing to have another webinar just focused on that, because I think there is a lot to talk about when it comes to portfolio and setting up the structure of your portfolio with all the products and all the projects underneath. And this would be, you know, something, if we see that you want to have that and the community is asking for, we can definitely set it up. And I'm sure Paul will help us do that. I will go back to my questions, because I think we have time for one more demo. Like we haven't touched on Zephyr. And Zephyr is great to show in terms of how the user stories and the test cases come together and how we can see that. So Omar, if there is anything that you can show us in terms of how you can set up test cases and how you link them back to the user stories.
Yeah, that's a very good question and an option to demonstrate. So if you remember my analogy at the beginning, guys, Zephyr is your brakes in your car, right? So it's stop. Let's make sure everything is working. Move on. So Zephyr is a plugin. When you install it, you will see this tab, this option, sorry, at the top with this menu. So Zephyr allows you to create test cycles. So the same way you create iterations for managing a story, the same way you can create test cycles for your stories, right? So you can create, for example, for iteration 1, you can create test cycle 1. And then all the test cases will be under that test cycle. So I'm going to show you a test case that I created in advance. In this case, this is called Identify Missing Accommodation test case. It is linked to this story 47, which is Identify Missing Accommodations. And the beauty of this is that you, in a very simple way, you capture the test steps, the test data, and the expected results for the test case. So you can do this while you're doing backlog grooming, right? Your test team is creating test cases related to stories at the same time that your product owner is making sure that the stories are correctly written, have all the acceptance criteria, and so on, right? So when you go into iteration planning, you not only have the stories, but you also have the test cases. So then you put everything into the iteration and then you start, right? So this is very powerful because you have it integrated in the same tool. It's integrated with your story. And when you execute the test case, so in this case, I'm going to execute this. I'm going to add it to release 1. And in this case, I'm going to say this is for, I'm just going to pick this Apple, this case, and I'm going to assign it to me. Okay, so while I am executing the test case, let's say user can log in, the expected result is good, it passes. User clicks on travel details, I need to see, or I need to see my trip to Montreal data or incomplete travel data. Okay, it fails. You can actually create a defect directly in the test case, and this bug will be associated to the test case, and then the test case to the story. So you have everything associated immediately, right? There is no need for linking bugs and test cases after the fact. You have everything with a very simple, I mean, it's just a click. And you capture all the information here, new defect. Sorry. It's assigned. Again, you use your components, which are the personas related to this. I think in this case, the persona is an airline. You can add the description of the bug, the release, the priority. You manage your priorities here as well for bugs. And you just create the defect. And if we refresh the page, you can see that this test case in step 2 has a defect. This is another benefit of doing this sort of test management. The defects are associated to the step. This is very important, right? In my experience, I have seen with many teams, we raise defects, but we really don't understand where they belong to. This tool will help you with that, right? You can associate the defect to the specific step. Why? Why is that important? Because step number 1 is good. You don't need to focus on logging. You need to focus on this, right? This will help you with managing your time, managing the development of the fix, and so on.
So can I see somewhere where all these defects are and like a ratio, like a summary to say, okay, so for this release, I had 50 or 100 or 200 defects. So
Yep.
I can use that as an improvement for my next release to see, you know, if my defects are decreasing and so on.
Exactly. So yes, Zephyr provides an out-of-the-box test summary functionality. And it's just as simple as just clicking on it. Test summary. I have 4 test cases. I have executed 3. Well, sorry. On executed 3, executed 1. As you can see, you also have a breakdown per release, per components. In this case, these are your personas. If you want to cycle summary, this is your test cycle summary. This gives you the specific IDs for the test cases and also shows you the defects, right? So in this case, for example, for 56, I had a defect, but it's closed, right? So you have everything. Basically, Zephyr does everything for you. All the reporting is here.
Yeah, that's very important for product owners because the product owners do testing, the user acceptance testing. And I had product owners building these test cases and they were going through it and they were making sure that the user acceptance testing and the quality acceptance testing, which were more like the functional ones, and then the security and all those were all coming together. So you could see, you know, that view.
Yeah, and think about it. Think about the power of this. You can define test cycles per type of testing. You can have a security test cycle, a functional test cycle, an accessibility test cycle, and so on, right?
Yes.
It's really powerful. I mean, it's just, you just need your imagination and creativity to manage your product.
Perfect. Okay, so the one thing that I wanted also to show was the product calendar, or you know, where you can see the iterations and the releases there. And if you can talk a little bit about that, and also if we have time, just stop on the user journey there to see how you build the user journey using Gliffy.
Yep. So I'm going to start with the user journey quickly. So I created, again, a page. And this is another type of diagram that you can create with Gliffy, right? In this case, this is a user journey. And again, the beauty of this is that you can have or create sub-pages, for example, for enter password. Let's assume that you can create a wireframe diagram for just this step, and you can link it. You can click on enter password here in the user journey. And let me show you, that can take you to a wireframe. Let's assume that this is that page, right? This is a wireframe diagram, also using Gliffy, right? So you can create all the wireframes from a website product in Confluence using Gliffy, and then link them to your user journey. I'll go back to the user journey, right? And link them to every single step in your user journey. So that is the way to create user journeys and wireframes. And the other question you had, Joanna, is the team calendar. So the team calendar, I think I previously talked a little bit about that. It's a macro. It's a macro that you set in your setup in Confluence. And when you use this, you can create it for different products, for the product as a whole. And you can create events. Those events could be your Jira project releases, leaves, birthdays, events, or your Agile sprints. So that's why you see here, I have iteration 1. I cannot see iteration 2 because I have not started it. But the moment I start the iteration, it will be shown in the team calendar. So you have a real-time integration using this macro. This is not an out-of-the-box macro. You need to get it, right? There is a license for this.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Omar. I think we are getting, I have another question from Sandeep quickly. Can you please tell how did you create the user journey flowchart? Using Confluence or using another add-on?
Well, I will use Gliffy. So I'm gonna quickly show you how you start. So it's basically you need to create a new Confluence page, Gliffy diagram. Then you invoke the macro, Gliffy diagram. And as you can see, this is everything you can do, right? You can go from a flowchart. There are predefined templates here that you can use, or you can create a blank one, a new one from the scratch. In the case of the user journey, I used, here it is. I went to flowcharts and created this user journey flow that is already created as a template.
And you have so many templates there. I saw
Yeah,
for SWOT analysis, for all org charts and so on.
Yeah. So then
Yes.
you can customize here the steps, and then you just save it with a new name. Right? Then you close it, and then you publish the page. Important, because if you don't do that step, then your Gliffy diagram won't be created. But this is basically how I created that user journey page.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I will pass it back to Peter, but first of all, I'd like to thank you, Omar. We've worked together a couple of times in different organizations. I would always go back and work with you. It's always a pleasure, and I'm very proud that I can say that, you know, just it's so important to be able to go back to people you worked with and say, I would work with you again. You've done a wonderful job, and I'm sure everybody appreciated. And then if everybody has any questions, any further questions, send them to us. As I said, we are just starting the series of webinars on tools, so we would be happy to schedule some follow-ups with you, no problem, and get more feedback from you and more questions, and bring your teams. Like, we could do some webinars with teams with specific questions. So we are always willing to do that and dedicate our time. And with that, I will pass it back to Peter who's on mute. So to wrap up the session.
Okay, thank you, and thank you to Omar's wonderful session. So if I could just get the screen back, oh, I think I can do that with my power here. There we go. So thank you, Omar, and thank you, Paul, as well, for your sponsorship and that of Valiantys to help us out to put together the demos. Greatly appreciated. So if I got the right screen showing up here, I hope, no, I don't. I have the wrong screen. Sorry about that. Let's try this again. There we go. Now I got the right screen. Okay, so just as a reminder, as I mentioned, we do have an online course that's available. Those of you who have registered, we can give you a 50% discount just by emailing us. This course consists of 8 modules with 4 micro lectures in each module. The micro lectures are between 7 and 10 minutes. Sometimes Joanna and I get carried away and they're a little bit longer. Within each one of these little micro lectures or sections, we have a template for you to do. We also include an applied example for you to follow how to complete the template. Plus, you can send us the templates or your completed template worksheet, and we'll review it and provide you comments. It is based on our book, our best-selling book, Gen P, New Generation of Product Owners Who Care About Their Customers. And through that book, we will talk about our Achieve model. I'll share how to group the skills and techniques that you need to know as a product owner. So hopefully you'll look at the course and take advantage of the offer that we have for you for attending this session, which we're very much appreciated for all of you attending. And then the final thing I'd just like to mention before we wrap up for today is that we've already booked our next webinar for July 17th. I got the date right. Again at noon, we're going to be joined by Dr. Phil Walsh, who's a friend and a colleague of mine from Ryerson University, who will be talking about sustainability. And we'll talk about sustainable products and how sustainable products will build a sustainable business, something that's very critical in today's world with everything going on to make sure we understand how that is done. This is a bit of a change. The last 2 webinars have been more tools focused. As Joanna mentioned, we will come back to tools as your questions to us warrant that. So but this will be a little bit different, and Bill is a very engaging speaker, so I think we'll enjoy him in a different change of pace. If you have any questions that you want for more about Jira, please email us at info@newgenp.com, or if you have any questions around for sustainability for Phil, you can email us as well. I've got the QR code here on the screen that you can use to register, or you can just go to our webinars page and the link will be there to register as well. And we'll send out reminders as we get closer to you. So with that, thank you very much for taking time to join us. Thank you again, Paul and Omar, for a wonderful session, and Joanna for all your insightful questions and monitoring all the questions that came in from our attendees. So have a great rest of your day and a great weekend, and we look forward to hearing from you on email and seeing you in about 4 weeks' time to talk about sustainable products and sustainable business. Thank you.
Great job, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Trish.
Awesome session. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandeep. Thank you for your questions.